Hi, I'm Scott Bakken with HHA Sports, and one of the most frequently asked questions we get when somebody's looking to switch from a multiple pin sight to a single pin sight, or has been shooting a single pin sight for a while, is what happens when in a hunting scenario you have your single pin sight set at a fixed yardage and an animal comes in and say it's at that predetermined fixed yardage, and then suddenly jumps back or spooks or whatever, but very quickly changes to a new yardage. What do you do? And it's a question that you hope doesn't happen, but it's something that you should be prepared for. But what we're gonna do today is show you exactly how to prepare for a scenario like that when shooting a single pin sight, and hopefully kind of ease any concerns that you may have when considering switching to a single pin. So the test that we're gonna do, it's called finding your maximum point blank range. And this is a test that there's been several articles written on it. There's been some other videos done on it, but today we're gonna strictly focus on showing you how to do this at home with a single pin sight. So what we're gonna do is we have a deer target set up behind us, and we're gonna have basically our determined kill zone. So what we would consider a killing area on a deer, which for today, it's about a 9-inch kill zone. So we're gonna mark off where the bottom of the heart is and approximately where the top of the lungs would be, and that's our kill zone. And like I said, that's about 9 inches. There's some variances in there, but for the testing, we have a 9-inch kill zone. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna shoot several rounds. Our first round is gonna be an arrow at 5 yards, and our next round is gonna be an arrow at 10 yards, and then 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, and 40. And what we're gonna do at each one of those distances is we're gonna shoot every single one of those yardages with our sight set at 20, and then we're gonna shoot the round again with our sight set at 30, and then finally a final round with our sight set at 40. And what we're gonna try to do is see at what marking on our sight, so what, should we have our sight set at 20, 30, or 40 to where we can land the most arrows within that 9-inch kill zone without having to adjust our dial or adjust our slide or anything like that. We just want to see what's the sweet spot to have our sight set at to where we can be the most accurate and the most consistent without having to make any changes. So again, we're gonna shoot our first round of arrows at 5 yards with our sight set at 20, and then we'll continue to work our way back and then do it all over again at 30 and 40 yards. The sight that we're using today is an Optimizer Kingpin Hunter Edition. Well, this is the result after our first round of arrows. So our first 4 arrows were 5, 10, 15, and 20 yards with our sight set at 20, aiming at the top mark. So our first 4 arrows are pretty much, unchanged between the 4 different distances. So, if shooting at a deer, at 20 yards, with my sight set at 20, it didn't matter if it was 5 or 20 yards, I would hit where I'm aiming. So it's, that's about what I would expect. But now we're gonna leave our sight set at 20, and we're gonna work our way back to 25, 30, 35, and 40, still aiming at the top dot. So basically with your sight set at 20, you're always gonna aim at the top dot between 5 and 40 yards. So our first 4 arrows were between 5 and 20. Our next 4 are gonna be between 25 and 40. So you can see with our final 4 arrows from 25 to 40 that there's a little bit greater variation in the results. So our first 4 arrows were, in a pretty tight group, but now that we've moved back a little bit farther, you can see they started to spread out. So again, with our sight set at 20 and aiming at the top line at 25 yards, our first arrow landed, about dead center. But then as we went farther back, the arrows started to fall. So our next arrow down was our shot at 30. The third one was 35. And then the very bottom one, which missed the deer completely, was 40. And again, that was with my sight set at 20, aiming at the top line. So with our first set of testing, I mean, if we were to measure from where our very first arrow hit at 5 yards, which was right on the orange tape, all the way down, you're looking at a impact range of about 19 inches. So that's a pretty, substantial impact range. And, again, with this testing, if this was a real life scenario, we only landed 5 arrows within our set kill zone. So now we're gonna change our sight to 30 yards, go through the same round of shots from 5 to 40 yards, and we're gonna aim at the top line still, and we'll see what we get doing that. So again, we're just trying to find that sweet spot for our single pin sight to be set at, to where we can land the most arrows in the kill zone without having to make any sort of adjustment. So we'll change our sight to 30 and see how that turns out. So here's what the final round looks like with our sight set on 30. And again, these final 4 shots were shot at 25, 30, 35, and 40. And you can see that the impact range did shrink a little bit compared to what we had with our sight set on 20. But our first 4 shots, although they were all grouped tightly together, they impacted just high of our kill zone. So those 4 arrows were at 5, 10, 15, and 20 yards. And again, they hit, pretty close to each other, but we're out of our kill zone. So, this impact range, if we measured from, where our first 4 arrows impacted down to our last arrow, is roughly about a foot. So, the impact range did shrink compared to the 19-inch impact range that we had with our sight set at 20. But with our sight set at 30, we only had 2 arrows land within our kill zone, because again, the first 4 were just a hair high. So, the first round with our sight set on 20, we had 5 arrows land in the kill zone, and only 2 with our sight set at 30. So we're going to do the final round of testing, and we're going to set our sight to 40 yards, and we're going to move to aiming at the bottom line. So with our sight set at 20, we aimed at the top line, and with our sight set at 30, we aimed at the top line. But now, because we're adjusting our sight to 40, and the laws of physics kind of play some tricks on us here, so we're going to aim at the bottom line, and we're going to shoot our final round of arrows starting at 5 yards, and then we'll finish at 40 yards. So we just finished up shooting our final 4 arrows with our sight set at 40, and our yardages were 25, 30, 35, and 40. And you can see that there is still some variance between the yardages. However, our first 4 shots, which were 5 to 20 yards with our sight set at 40, impacted, pretty close together, and then started kind of falling as we backed up. So our impact range with our sight set at 40 was actually about 9.5 to 10 inches. So it shrunk quite a bit compared to our sight set at 30 and our sight set at 20. And again, with our sight set at 40, we're aiming at the bottom dot, and our sight set at 20-30, we're aiming at the top dot. So, you know, the preferred way of, you know, I guess adjusting your single pin is if you can range the actual distance and then adjusting your sight accordingly. But by doing this test, I just learned that if I range find a barrier around my setup at 40 yards, any animal that crosses that barrier and is in between me and that 40-yard mark, if I have my sight set at 40 and aim at the bottom of the kill zone, I'll land my shot in there. So outside of our final arrow, almost every arrow landed in the kill zone. So, you know, this is a good test you can do at home. And again, you know, this was for my setup. So everybody's setup's gonna be a little bit different, but you know, this is the way to figure out that sweet spot to have your sight set. So, you know, in those certain situations you get in, you don't have to move your sight. I'm Scott Bakken with HHA Sports. For more information on our products, check us out at hhasports.com. You can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.